Joining me now is former White House Chief of Staff and Senior Advisor at Bardnall Partners, Mick Mulvaney. Mick, thanks so much for joining us on the show. Huge news out of the Supreme Court this week, which has decided to rule on Donald Trump's claim that he has immunity from prosecution on charges that he plotted to overturn the 2020 election. What does this mean? How does it go? And if the court grants Trump immunity, will this lead to a new effort to delegitimize the court by the left?
Yes to all of the above, James. Let's sort of walk through what might happen. The court could say that Trump is immune from any sorts of claims. That would essentially be a dismissal of the action against him in Washington, D.C. related to January 6th, and likely lead to a dismissal of the actions against him in the state of Georgia. And for that reason would lead to efforts by the left to further delegitimize the Supreme Court. If, however, they go the other way, and it's likely they will, most legal scholars I've talked to, and I used to practice law a long time ago, don't see how the president really makes a claim here for total immunity. So if the court goes the other way and says that Trump is not immune, there's still a huge benefit to Trump in that this delays the trial. There's a really, really good chance now that this trial might not take place. I'm talking now about the January 6th federal criminal action might not take place until right before or right after the November 2024 general election. And it might not actually be finished until after the election. So in theory, you could have Donald Trump in trial on election day, winning that night, and then found guilty a week later, which just leads down the road to a whole bunch of bizarre sort of outcomes.
Well, it does, but also it does when you put it in the bigger context of the other Trump legal issues. You know, the Georgia case against him, well, that's become a whole mess. Other cases are being delayed and likely not happening until after the election as well. Has the lawfare strategy of the left to get Trump off the ballot or keep him, from running or winning, is that starting to fall apart here?
No, it's still quite successful. Here's what's happening is that, yes, Trump is going to win the cases to allow him to stay on the ballot. There's no way any court ultimately will kick him off of the ballot. So he'll win that battle. And he's winning in sort of the court of public opinion. Keep in mind, he was actually doing worse in polls before all this lawfare started. So that message that he's made very effectively, that is, look what they're doing to me. If they can do it to me, imagine what they can do to you. Elect me and I'll make sure that doesn't happen. That continues to sell. Here's the one place it's hurting him. It's hurting him with money. It absolutely is. It's draining his campaign. Joe Biden has almost twice as much money saved up for the general election right now as Donald Trump does. So at that particular very critical part of the American political process, it is working, and it is sapping funds that Donald Trump could otherwise use to run against Joe Biden.
But, Mick, back to what you just said there about how people are reacting to this. Would you say that the Democrats have made a real mistake in essentially building Trump up into this huge monster? Because if they just treated him like a normal candidate, then he probably wouldn't wind up getting all of this attention and support that he's getting from being able to say he's being persecuted.
Yeah, but they can't do that, James. Trump derangement syndrome is absolutely real. Donald Trump just does something to the left that no other Republican, conservative, right-leaning politician has done in my lifetime. They cannot help themselves. Keep in mind that every time they have what they perceive to be a win against him in court, they go home to their cocktail parties in Washington, D.C. and Manhattan and high-five and celebrate, and he goes up 2 and 3 points in the polls. It's just the most bizarre thing I've ever seen, but the left can't help themselves.
Well, it is pretty entertaining, though. I mean, but let's look at this other issue, too. Illinois, they've taken him off the primary ballot. How big a threat is this?
None, practically none. The judge actually even entered that finding, stayed her own finding pending appeal, because I think she knows it'll probably it'll be overturned. It's just for right now, at least the primary ballot. Nobody really cares about the Republican primary in Illinois. Trump is going to win anyway. He's going to win the nomination before the Illinois primary comes around. In any event, keep in mind, he might lock it up as early as a week from Tuesday. So it is, again, one of those things. Is it much ado about nothing? Maybe. Does it help Trump? Probably. Can the left help themselves? No, they cannot.
Indeed. Mick, finally, I want to talk about a more serious story here. The death of 22-year-old nursing student Laken Riley in Georgia at the hands of somebody who was allegedly in the country illegally and had been arrested a number of times before this crime and was let free by authorities over and over again. I want to play a little clip here. The mayor of Athens, Georgia, where this happened, refused to accept that America's flippant immigration policies had anything to do with this. But people weren't happy about this. Have a look at this.
I caution against conflating immigration and crime. The data demonstrates that the two are not connected. And you had that notion metastasizing in places like Charlottesville.
This is an invasion!
Meanwhile, Donald Trump has just been down at the border. Here's what he had to say a little while ago.
Every time you hear the term migrant crime, you know where that comes from. Allowing thousands and thousands and actually millions and millions of people to come. Could be 15 million, could be 18 million by the time he gets out of office.
Now, the senseless death of this nursing student has really captured, I think, a lot of people's attention here. Is Donald Trump and other Republicans really on a big winner with the southern border crisis?
They are, James. It's ordinarily in this country, the southern border immigration, more specifically illegal immigration, is the type of thing that Republican candidates use to get out their base, their Republican voters. Again, we do not have mandatory voting in this country, so we're always looking for things that drive people to the polls. Ordinarily, this is a right-wing issue. It's not anymore. It has become a bipartisan issue. It's become an issue in many of the blue left-leaning states. And this terrible crime in Georgia has been a really, really big deal. Keep in mind, even the left-leaning press actually covered this story pretty heavily the first couple of days, and then they stopped after they found out what it was doing politically. Georgia is a critical swing state. So what you're talking about now is a terrible crime linked directly to an illegal immigrant in a swing state. This is going to have dramatic political implications, not just in the presidential election, but all the way down the ballot. Crime linked to illegal immigration is going to be perhaps the biggest issue in the 2024 election, eclipsing, for the first time again in my adult lifetime, eclipsing the economy, eclipsing jobs, eclipsing inflation. This looks to be becoming the big issue of this election cycle.
That's right, Mick, and I think I've just seen a CNN poll which suggests that it is, in fact, many voters' #1 issue. Mick, we're going to have to leave it there, but we'll see you next week on the U.S. Report. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, James.